And now I'd like to introduce today's facilitator, Betsy Hagan. Betsy is an instructor and independent consultant specializing in organizational effectiveness, talent development, and executive coaching. Her background includes 25 years of executive leadership experience in corporate human resources, operations and program management with Hewitt Associates, a $3 billion HR consulting and outsourcing firm, and Baxter Healthcare, a $10 billion leading manufacturer of medical products. Today, she leads CPED's Foundations of Management certificate, focused on helping managers motivate their teams, influence stakeholders, leverage resources, and enhance business processes. Betsy, thanks for joining us today. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me, Jeremiah, and the rest of the WSB team. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to everybody. So welcome, folks. As Jeremiah explained, I spend most of my time now helping organizations figure out basically how to get their frontline managers transitioned to that role really effectively. I'm not quite sure whoever is joining us today or whoever might be watching this webinar maybe after the fact, whether or not you're here specifically for your own development, like, I need to delegate more, or perhaps you have people in your organization, other managers that report to you that you're looking for ideas on how to kind of describe this expectation to them and also provide them with some coaching support around how to delegate more effectively. Because I wasn't sure sort of the mix of people that might be on the line, I kept it pretty simple and straightforward around what I'm going to talk about today. This is just kind of a version of what we teach in our Foundations of Management certificate, and in particular in our boot camp program, which is the kind of anchor to that certificate, which helps people, again, when they're making that transition from individual contributor to frontline manager. But I think one of the reasons why now at this stage in my career, I enjoy spending so much time with frontline managers is because what I see is that when good foundational skills are really embedded and enhanced and practiced early on, right when people get that first responsibility to manage the performance of others, it really is supportive of them becoming really good and robust and effective leaders for their organization. And so, again, what we're going to talk about today is not something that's particularly complicated or an action or a skill that is complicated or difficult to master, but it is one that I have found over the course of now almost 30 years in human resources, supporting managers and leaders in parts of the organization that just need to make sure that talent is as effective as it possibly can be. That it's one that often gets neglected, and people fail to delegate enough and effectively until it becomes something that they just have to do. And then they find themselves in a situation where they haven't necessarily practiced it very much or thought about it very much. And the tendency is for them to maybe make some mistakes as they go along. So what I put together was just for us to accomplish 3 pretty simple outcomes in the time that we have together. I think I probably have about 40 minutes worth of discussion points. And then I'm going to leave it open for some questions to be able to answer for anybody. But the first is just to understand the principles and process of delegating tasks. Again, it's not complicated, but I found that if you follow a few simple principles, you're going to wind up with a better result, higher level of engagement, less likely to make mistakes, to be able to delegate tasks at a variety of levels. So I think situationally, we know that all delegation isn't the same, and that based on what we're delegating and who we're delegating to and the amount of risk associated with it, we may be delegating at a really high level or maybe at a really low level. But just to be conscientious and transparent about what level you're really delegating at. And then I think the most important aspect, as whether you're a frontline manager, whether you're a leader of managers, is that at every point that you have an opportunity to connect with employees, and in particular, in the case of delegation where you're assigning tasks to people, I think it's really important that as leaders, you're always taking the opportunity to make that connection between what you're doing, which is assignment of tasks, to employee development, the concept of autonomy and helping people become more independent and empowered, and of course, thinking about how it would impact engagement. So those are the three things that I just put together for today. In essence, right, as I said, delegation is a really foundational skill set that we teach to new managers. But I think where it becomes most critical is as not necessarily in that first supervisory set of responsibilities, but it's actually as you gain responsibility in terms of scope. So maybe that is that the size of the team that you're managing becomes much larger, or maybe, like I said, you begin managing other managers as a result of taking on more leadership responsibilities. Or even if you're not managing people, but you're managing big projects, maybe just the scope of the project. The point of it is that delegation very often at that point in time becomes really critical. When I see managers and leaders sort of in this picture, right, holding the world on their shoulders, never really focusing on an active and conscientious way of making sure that they are creating the right amount of bandwidth for themselves to be focused on really high value, high target kind of activity that supports what you do for your organization and how you're helping that organization achieve its strategic results. I think that what you have is, again, this lost opportunity, whether it's at the frontline manager or leader level, really to, I think, continuously, not necessarily improve your contribution, but really optimize your contribution. So for me, the lack of delegation, or when managers and leaders don't delegate, is not necessarily so much about what you're not giving the opportunity to people who work for you to maybe practice new skills and have opportunities to do different things, which is an obvious outcome, but it's that you might be actually sub-optimizing or under-optimizing your own contribution to your organizations. And like I said, that may not come to a head early on in your managerial career, but as you move up and gain scope, the pressure to need to refocus, reprioritize, kind of, re-resource your time and your productivity to those things that add the most value is going to happen. And at some point in time, you're going to find yourself where you may not have an option to delegate. There's a lot of things that have been written about why people choose not to delegate, or why they simply turn away from delegation. If you were to Google delegation right now, you'd probably find hundreds of different blog posts and articles, and most of them at some point in time talk about the barriers that managers and leaders have to delegating. And most writers around delegation and people who talk about delegation like it's an expertise, right, will say, I don't know, they seem to always tend to blame a need for control and a fear of failure as being two of the primary drivers for why leaders and managers don't delegate. But in my experience, honestly, I find that the greater prevalence for why people don't do it is not necessarily a need for control, but it's actually kind of a feeling of guilt. You know, we all know that most organizations, right, are focused in on making sure that you've got the right people doing the right work, producing the right level of output. And that right level of output is always under scrutiny around how much more, how much better, can we do? What can we do? Can we do more with less? Can we do same, more with same? There's always a pressure, there has been a pressure, right, on organizations to kind of always be focused in on that productivity aspect. And so I think for many of us, right, the idea of taking something off of our plate to put on someone who works for us, their plate, can be a question of feeling of like, okay, they're already really busy. They already have a full plate, and my putting something else on their plate is either not fair or not right, or it's somehow deficient in my capability of getting everything done that I am supposed to get done. So I think one of the things that, as we talk about this further, is perhaps for you guys to consider not only how much you're delegating, but what prevents you from delegating, or what gets in the way, any barrier that you have for delegating. Certainly there are cases where we feel like we want to maintain control, like we feel like there's a great risk if we were to not do the work ourselves. And in those cases, I think we have to work through them. But again, if you're not conscientious of why you're delegating, when you're delegating, and what the value of delegation is, then I think there's a higher propensity to hold everything on because you don't want to, again, add to maybe what is an already full workload for the people that report to you. The problem is that, again, when we don't delegate on a regular basis, when we don't have practice skills, as Shannon was talking about, the opportunity for us to do something poorly, I think, goes up. And so the thing about delegation is, even though it's not a difficult task to master by any stretch of the imagination, the impact of doing it poorly can be really great. So if you have ever had a situation where someone has handed something off to you in a way that has been irritating, annoying, just downright maybe felt disrespected in the process, or undervalued, or just not valued, you know that can, if it happens once, maybe it's no big deal, but if it happens over and over again, it begins to wear down on you, and it begins to create a level of disengagement, I think, or it tends to support, you're becoming disengaged with it. It certainly can impact your motivation around doing the work and wanting to have, the best, kind of putting your best foot forward. So I think that there's a lot at stake for an activity that doesn't necessarily require a lot of skill, but it does take a lot of conscious behavior choices. So what is it? It's just the process of assigning tasks. We do it all day long, whether or not we are assigning a task that's coming off of our own plate, or it's just a task that comes in, something new. Think about just problem solving and how we think about, a problem comes in, maybe we're going to do it ourselves, or maybe we're going to pass it off to someone else. And at that point of passing it off to someone else, when it comes to us first, that is a form of delegation. So again, we do it all day long. We do it in our professional lives. We do it in our personal lives. This morning, I got delegated to go pick up the dry cleaning, and I can tell you it wasn't done very effectively. And I was annoyed by the fact that apparently the purpose of, or the choice of delegating it to me was because I was working from home today. Anyways, there are a lot of advantages to delegation. Again, you guys probably all know these, but really for yourself, the win in delegating more often and delegating well is that it's going to give you the time and ability to focus on higher level tasks, or in other words, just making sure that you are optimizing your contribution to your organization based on what they need you to be leading on. It gives others the ability to learn and develop new skills. And this is something that we shouldn't, as leaders and managers, take for granted. But also by doing it well, I think that it gives us opportunities to engage with our employees, our staff in ways that supports building a trusting relationship with them, as well as a way to just constantly test the effectiveness of our communication. And when we think about it across the enterprise, right, when we think about it just overall around resourcing and resource management, being able to effectively delegate, it improves efficiencies, it improves productivity, and time management. It's an effective strategy for time management. So there are a lot of benefits. I don't think I probably need to sell you guys on delegation, just a question of then how do you make sure that you get it done? And I thought that I would just start by talking about it in the negative. So like I said, I spend a lot of time today with frontline managers, but there was a point in my career where at different organizations, I was in human resources and I was dealing with managers and leaders who were challenged by the way in which they were leading and managing. And in some cases, it was some of the habits that they had created in the process of delegating tasks to others. And so I would always say, nobody goes into the conscious decision to delegate something to someone else to do it poorly. But I do think that we fall into bad habits. And so these are sort of 4 common bad habits I have seen leaders and managers fall into. And I thought maybe it'd be helpful as you guys either self-assess, well, where am I right now in terms of my delegation skills? Or again, if you have managers that you're supporting, do you see something in them that might be reflective of their starting or continuing bad habits? The first is what I call the drive-by delegator. So this is the person that it sounds like this. Hey, can you do me a favor? Right? It's the sort of, there isn't a lot of thought to it. I just need someone to do something for me. And I kind of approach it as a just stop by and drop something off, right? It's informal, it's conversational. And again, once or twice, this might not be a bad thing, but when it happens over and over and over again, I can tell you that over time, people will start to avoid or be looking down if they see you coming at them, or wonder if they're going to have a phone call with you, whether they're going to get something that's been put on their plate as just sort of a afterthought. So that's kind of the drive-by delegator. That's the one I see the most in terms of bad habits. The second is what I call the dribbling delegator. So this is the person that just gives out tasks in kind of a random, just a little bit of here, a little bit there. There's no rhyme nor reason. There's no methodology to it. It's sort of like, can you attend this meeting for me? It's without context. It doesn't necessarily fit into any broader concept of what needs to get accomplished. It might tend to be all the stuff that you don't want to do, or stuff you feel like is really low value. And at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily mean anything to the people that you're delegating to. They don't see it. You might see it as the win for yourself, but you don't necessarily create that situation where they see a win for them. The third one is the mumbling delegator. And I don't mean this literally, I mean mumble like, this is the kind of delegation where you know something needs to get done, you start the delegation process, but somehow in the conversation, it's sort of like, I'm not sure what we need to get done, just start this and then come back and we'll talk about it. It's like you don't really know what the outcomes are that you really want to have, or you don't have all the information. And so why I call it the mumbling delegator is because really the person that you delegated to, the recipient of it, is sort of unclear. They're like, wait, what am I supposed to do? Or what did I just hear? So the mumbling delegator is the person who doesn't really think through all of the questions that may need to get answers. And then when they don't have the answers for them at the point at which they're delegating, they simply push that off for a later date and leave that person in sort of a state of real vagueness, right? And then the last one is the Chicken Little delegator. This is the person whose delegation is always coming in the context of something is broken, something is a problem, something is urgent and it needs to get fixed right away. And again, once or twice doing something like this, but when it happens over and over again, this kind of bad habit is sort of creates the same kind of annoying situation for staff when leaders don't recognize that there's a problem that no one is addressing at the root cause. So if you're in an environment where you guys deal with Lean Six Sigma, continuous improvement, it's like if if you're always putting band-aids on things, if you're always dealing with the same problems over and over again and no one is ever addressing it at the root cause or even acknowledging it as a systemic problem across your organization, it can be annoying for people, and it can begin to erode people's trust that is anybody really thinking about this in terms of a longer term fix to something. So those four are ones that I've seen kind of happen over and over again. And like I said, people don't ever go into the process of delegating work to someone else with the intention of doing it poorly. But I think some of these habits that we get into actually create the situation where we are probably less than optimal in the way in which we're doing delegation. Great delegators, on the other hand, people who have really practiced skills and have really focused, I think the things that they do really well are, first and foremost, they understand the value of delegation, not only to themselves, but to the people that they're delegating to. They identify the appropriate targets. And what I mean by that is they make a conscious decision around, so what's the task? What's the task at hand? What are the skill sets that I need? And how am I going to match that up with the person who's the target for that delegation? And so it isn't just a random whoever's got the, whoever I run into first in the hallway, or whomever I think has the most time or is the least busy right now, that I will assign this task. There's a real thought process and a consciousness to putting those two things together. Great delegators get everyone aligned and on the same page. And what I mean by that is, so, you might be thinking about delegation just in a series of maybe smaller or less important tasks. But when you think about it, especially at more senior levels, you might start delegating large projects or large portions of projects. And what I mean by alignment is that, if you are in fact delegating some aspect of project leadership or work leadership, team leadership, it's really important that not only is the person that you're delegating to fully understanding of what it is that you expect of them, but also if there's other stakeholders involved that they are going to need to interact with, that you as a leader set them up for success. And that's what I mean by alignment. If you're giving somebody big project work, make sure that the whole team understands that that delegation has happened and they're aligned with the authority that you're delegating to people, leadership responsibilities that you might be delegating to people. If you're working across, if this person's going to need to be working across functions, make sure that other functions are aware and understanding of what you're doing. That's what I mean by alignment. The fourth one is to exhibit behaviors that build trust. So this is things like making sure that you are very purposeful and supportive of the task you're delegating, the person you're delegating it to, and then setting really clear expectations around what is expected in terms of an outcome and how this person's going to be judged. Being transparent about that from the initial conversations around delegation to the actual transference of responsibilities I think is huge in trust building. If things break down at any point in time, you can really create an environment of mistrust where people, where people are uneasy about taking on tasks that you might delegate because they don't feel that they're going to get clarity around how they're supposed to be successful at completing those tasks. And then the last thing is, people who are really good delegators never seem to let ego get in the way. I always talk to new managers about the fact that taking on people management responsibilities is sometimes the shifting the mindset from being the hero, being the problem solver, being the person who is the go-to it person for other people in the organization to get stuff done, to being the hero's coach. And I think great delegators understand that in the opportunity to get value for yourself around being able to maybe delegate tasks that allow you to create bandwidth to focus your contribution in different ways, that you don't fail to make sure that those that are taking over the opportunity to solve problems and get stuff done in lieu of you, get that credit and get that opportunity to basically be the hero, right? That it isn't just, hey, can you do these 3 tasks? And then at the end of the day, I'm still going to be the one that gets all the accolades for when, overall things are going well. I've talked a little bit about managing your bandwidth now. So I get a lot of questions from people around, so what should I delegate? And I don't have, there isn't a laundry list or a checklist that you can use that really evaluates what's good to delegate and what's not good to delegate. It's situational, and it's going to depend on, what you see as opportunities to kind of shift things from your plate to someplace else. But also, I think looking at it through the lens of overarching talent management and where you have opportunity to give people some new challenges. But I had read this article a long time ago in HBR, and I thought the author had made a really good statement that stuck with me. She wrote, "The upper limit of what's possible will increase only with each collaborator you empower to contribute their best work to your shared priorities. Likewise, your power decreases with every initiative you unnecessarily hold on to." And so I think back about, my transition to leadership and recognizing that part of becoming a leader is recognizing that, doing everything does not make you a good leader. That, doing the right things makes you a great leader. And as you gain responsibility and influence within your organizations, that what is right is going to shift and change, and you need to be prepared to make those shifts and changes as your organization needs you to. So part of the managing your bandwidth is thinking about, what could I delegate, not from the perspective of just all this non-value added stuff, but how do I make sure that the team I have is prepared so that if in case the organization does need me to stretch and expand and refocus, reshift, on different areas in order for us to achieve strategic results, do I have a team behind me that can actually take over some of the stuff that I'm doing today? But here's sort of some things that I've thought about as I thought about, what's the right thing to delegate. Certainly anything that's no longer part of your core job description. So a lot of us, management comes as a layer on other responsibilities that we already have. So we're in part of a team, and then we become the manager of that team. And then maybe we become the leader of the function, whatever it might be is. But I think, it's easier for us to just kind of like drag the baggage along with us. And at some point in time, you might need to look and say, really, what is the core job description that I have? What are the real key things that I need to deliver on? And what am I doing? How am I spending my time? And are there things that I can delegate off? I think that there's more way than one way to complete some of the tasks that we do today. The part of the great delegators don't let their egos get in the way is also thinking about it from the perspective of could other people bring new perspective to something that's already been done, right? So leading a project in a certain way, maybe a different person to lead the project would bring a different perspective, a different leadership style, who knows, right? But just the fact that it might be a good delegation target, something to delegate, if you think it might benefit from someone else's perspective. The task is not mission critical. I think that always changes. And so we're always looking at it in terms of what is mission critical right now. But if it is mission critical, that there's a value in cross-training others. So I talk a lot about the fact that delegation is a strategy for resource management. It's also a strategy for contingency planning. So part of building your bench for yourself is good management practice. It's good leadership practice. And then I think the last piece of it is not to be left aside, which is it's a skill that an employee should learn. Maybe the should from that comes because they're growing in their role, but it also could be because they are preparing for something in the future, or that they have career aspirations, and supporting them by delegating them certain kinds of responsibilities would be helpful. And the last one is that there's time to train someone on work. So if you're going to delegate to somebody and it's not something that they have done before, you are going to need to commit some time and energy to doing it, to supporting them. So how do you get to better in delegation? I think that once you decide what it is that you're going to delegate, then I think it's three things, right? It's being conscious of and transparent about the level of delegation you're performing. And like I said, it's not one size fits all. That you follow some basic principles, and that you connect every delegation to employee development and make sure that you're connecting it to their perception of their contribution. So here's how I talk about when you get conscious and transparent about what you're doing in delegation, and the fact of, I like to put things on a spectrum because I think that situationally it represents more realistic how it works versus just if I talked about, here's what delegation is and here's how it works. I think that there's a spectrum, right? And on each end of the spectrum is probably the worst behaviors or the worst concepts around delegation. And it's our job as leaders to kind of find that balance on these two spectrums. So on one end of the spectrum, you've got complete abdication. This idea that I'm just handing something off to someone. I'm basically just dropping something on somebody and I am walking away from it 100%. Clearly, you would see that there'd be a lot of issues that would be associated with this. In essence, you've got no briefing, you're not getting clarity on authority. People could leave with not knowing that, what the goal and outcomes are. They have no idea what the communication process, what the check-in process, what the sort of quality control process is going to look like. And it's kind of a sink or swim philosophy. Now, I can tell you, I have been the recipient of delegation that has shown up pretty close to this end result. And even though I felt very confident and competent that I could get it done, I did feel somewhat that it was a case of dumping and running, so to speak, on me. And it was only through my own motivation and willingness to reframe it myself as something that I would be, get an advantage from. But I didn't think very highly of the person who did that to me. On the other end of the spectrum, and sort of, if we don't want to go there, is micromanagement. So this is the idea that I'm giving you something, but I'm not really giving it to you because I'm going to basically stand over you the entire time and tell you exactly what to do, how to do it, monitor it incessantly and unnecessarily, and really, in essence, undermine your own confidence and capability to solve the problem or to effectively complete the task with any kind of autonomy whatsoever. So it's basically the zero autonomy end of the spectrum. Clearly, there are issues that will come as a result of micromanagement. First of all, again, as in both sides, you're not quite clear on what it is that I am actually responsible and accountable for. It's a lack of agreement, so there's some inequity around what you think the check-in monitoring process needs to look like. And I, as the target or the recipient of that delegation, believe that the monitoring and target should take place. So on one end of the spectrum, on the other end of the spectrum, right, we as leaders and managers have got to find balance. And trust me, there are certainly reasons why we would maybe lean more towards one side or lean more towards another side. You have someone that you have have seen and worked with for a long period of time. You're going to lean more on, having higher levels of trust and probably less process involved in the delegation than someone maybe that you've never worked with or someone who is very junior, right? So it's all about just finding the right balance. But in delegation, what we're balancing to really is a clarity around the level of authority and responsibility, that you as a leader make a conscious decision about the amount of autonomy reflected against that person's ability to do what they need to do, as well as the risk associated with what you're asking them to do. So sort of that, what is the risk to the task that you're talking about if they don't do it well? And then I think what's most important is that the communication, monitoring, and ongoing sort of check-in process is something that is agreed upon. That creates balance in and of itself. So the 5 levels of delegation that, by the way, I don't use this slide, but I use these 5 written out steps, so to speak, or levels. I pull this out all the time when I am going to be delegating, because the first thing I want to think about is, what is the level that I'm going in at? And then I challenge myself to basically go up the staircase towards higher levels and degrees of delegation, or am I staying lower or even going lower? And what is my rationale for doing that? So I use this to maintain and practice a high level of consciousness around what really is the level of delegation. So this is pretty simple. You guys could add complexity to this if it makes sense for what you do in your organization. But basically, the first to bottom rung level is one that we've all done before, which is, can you go get me something? I call it the fetch level. Can you fetch this for me? And there's a lot of reasons why we delegate that, because people have access, because they're good at it, because they have time, let's say. But we have no real intention for them to do anything with what we're asking them to go get. It's just, can you go get this? Can you look into this? Can you observe something? The next level then is, okay, so tell me what you see in what you are looking at, and give me sort of perspective, right? And maybe recommendation. what you think should be done. So it's a little bit more authority, a little bit more request of what the outcome is. So it isn't just go fetch, it's go fetch and tell me what you think. The next one is a similar, there's not a lot of degree of differentiation, but what I say this is that this is kind of the come up with a plan, but don't do anything until you've walked me through it in its entirety, right? So it is the go figure it out, decide the best course of action, but I ultimately want to be the end decision maker on this. The next level is the one that might sound familiar, which is just let me know what it is that you're going to do, and if I have a problem with it, I'll let you know, right? So it's more freedom. It's a clearer level of autonomy, with sort of a warning level that says, if I have any issues with this, I'll come and get you and stop you with it. And then the highest level is just go do it, right? Go do it and inform me after the fact. So I find this tool to be really useful as I have tried always to practice the idea of, if I'm going to delegate, to be really clear about the level of that I'm delegating. And I always am trying to challenge myself. Why am I not going a level higher than where I'm comfortable with? And if I can answer that question specifically and clearly, then it tells me, are there things that I need to do with the person that I'm delegating to, or just in general, that would allow me to get to that higher level? Clearly, there are reasons, and there's good reasons for us not to just send people off and to do things and to not have any, or not to have much oversight or input to it. But it's the question of just being conscientious about that and being clear about your reasons and purposeful about, this is the reason why I am delegating at this particular level. So I have just found this set of 5 levels to be a good, quick reminder for me as I really mainly prepare to go into conversations with people about something I might be delegating. So here I've got 8 what I just call principles of delegation. So rather than talking about delegation like a process, which I don't think adds any value, following a process is not as effective as if you, as a leader and a manager, follow certain principles. And this is not an exhaustive list. You may find that there are things that you would add to it, and I would encourage you to do that. But for me, I think about it in sort of 3 big buckets. The first bucket is to make the right and purposeful decision to connect what I'm delegating to the right person, right? So it's selecting the right person. And in that, I think there's 3 principles. Know what you want as an outcome, know the skills and abilities that are needed for that outcome to be achieved, and know the value of the receiver. So I don't go into delegation unless I can say, the reason why I'm delegating to Susie or Joe or Camille is because this is what they bring. This is what I think they're going to bring to this particular task. I am prepared to articulate that value, and I don't delegate until I can do that. And I'll get to why that's important. Then once you've connected the appropriateness of the target, right? What I'm delegating to, who I'm delegating to, then it's all about creating clarity, right? That performance standards are clear. How is this person's going to be judged, right? Based on what you're asking them to do. That the appropriate authority is assigned. So always, what you're giving people to do and the authority for them to do what they need to do and be successful needs to be on parity, right? And then it's all about, so then how are you going to monitor and support? And in this case, I think it's all about making sure that the principles you follow are supportive of engagement, motivation, and really building trust. So check-ins and controls are defined. So it isn't just, I'm going to drop it and leave it. It's that I'm going to delegate, and this is how we'll check in, at our weekly one-on-one meetings, or, at our weekly one-on-one meetings. However, if you need, to check in more frequently than that, at least in the beginning, or maybe at more critical times, that it's okay for us to do that. Let's agree to that right up front. That support is available so that you, as the person who's delegating, fully understand if there are resources that that person is going to need, and that they know how to access those resources. So maybe it's not you necessarily, maybe it's access to other people, maybe it's access to tools, whatever it is. And that the process is equitable. And what I mean by that is that this is a two-way dialogue, so that, you're going in with what you want to delegate, the task, the skills, the performance standards, the check-in and controls, and the resources that might be required, that that person has input to that and is able to maybe shape it based on their own perspectives and their own, levels of confidence. So I've gone in with delegating people maybe big responsibilities. They've actually, given me information through the dialogue that I needed to rethink how much support they were going to need, at least in the initial phase, what kind of resources they were going to need, their perspective on what the performance expectation should look like. So what I'm saying is that, it's better when it's always a two-way dialogue, and the person who's the recipient of the task has a chance to give input into the process of delegation. And then who you're delegating to, I think one of the things that as leaders and managers we need to be careful of is that when it's always about delegating for our own leverage and contribution, then I think we may likely always lean into people who kind of think like us, who have demonstrated our level of judgment, and certainly we may look at it in terms of only giving it to people who have demonstrated a certain level of performance. And so all I would ask you guys to think about is, if you have go-to people, in your organizations, you always go to them, then I think you need to step back and say, why is it that I'm always going to them? And should I, as a leader and a manager, be maybe thinking about how to allow others to also be recipients of challenges, of delegated tasks that create maybe some new things that people can do, some new interesting tasks that they can take on, because it is a way to develop your bench. Who's ready for a challenge? Who needs a stretch experience to advance their career? And I think most importantly, where can I shore up support for succession or contingency resource plans? At a minimum, I think every leader and manager should be looking at who and how you're delegating to answer that question of, am I building a good succession bench, and am I creating consistent and cross-functional skill sets for contingency reasons, right? Somebody leaves, I need to refocus my time. Am I building a good, strong, deep bench? So just real quickly, and then I'm going to open it up to questions just to go through the last couple of slides. But the criteria that I think of when I'm looking at who it is that I'm going to, give a stretch assignment to, the first thing I always look at is, what do I know about career aspirations? So if I know that someone is, for example, aspiring to move into a management role or supervisor role, then I may look at being able to delegate some tasks to them that I think will help them build some of the skill sets that they wouldn't necessarily get in their current position. So I might ask them to facilitate a team meeting, solicit feedback from people on a certain subject, just so that they get some experiences that put them in proximity to maybe activities and tasks that they wouldn't get in their normal role. I certainly always love to play to people's strengths. So I don't think that everybody is great at everything. And so I do try to look at delegation from the perspective of where can I leverage strength, but also where is it good for people to leverage their own strength, because it helps to build their competency and confidence. Clearly, what skills do people have, but also how quick do they learn? That's always important to me in terms of who I choose, in terms of stretch assignments. So if I'm going to give somebody a stretch assignment where I consider that I'm putting them in kind of deep water of something that they maybe haven't done before, I'm going to make sure that I'm giving those kinds of assignment to people that I think can learn quickly, know how to reach out, know what they don't know, and can raise their hand when they need help, right? And then performance, clearly I look at past performance as an indicator of future competency, and look at who's done really well in the past, and how does that set them up for my being able to give them something in terms of a stretch assignment for the future. So the last thing, and then I want to open it up to questions, is just this slide. This is a checklist that I actually use, so I put it down. I thought maybe it'd be something that would be useful. We certainly, in our Foundations of Management, our boot camp program, we lead with the idea of how you effectively manage and how you effectively engage with your employees is through the conversations that you're having. And so when you're having a conversation about delegation, you need to focus it on what does that other person need to hear, not just what do I need to make sure that I say. So they need to know why you're delegating. You need to check to make sure they fully understand the assignment that you're delegating to them. They're helping them to see the assignment related to the organization's mission, and that they connect that assignment to their professional goals, and that they understand what skills and resources they need to complete the task and how to acquire them. So it isn't sufficient enough for you to say, you're going to need to learn this system, or you're going to need to learn this particular skill set. You need to make sure that they understand, and this is how you're going to learn, or this is where you're going to go to get the kind of learning and skill building support, mentoring, coaching, shadowing, whatever it is that you're doing to support them. You need to walk away from that conversation knowing that they know how to go build those skill sets. All right. So in review, delegation gives you the time and ability to focus on higher level tasks, gives the ability of others to learn and develop new things. We talked about levels, and I think your ability to be transparent and make clear decisions about what level you're delegating will support better habits. I gave you like 8 principles that are kind of surrounded around 3 major steps: getting to the right person, setting clear expectations, and then monitoring and supporting, right? Stretch assignments are a great way to engage top talent, but you just need to be careful that you're not always going to the exact same person over and over again. And then focus in on make the most out of the conversation by focusing on what the other person really needs from you.